Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good week and a good back to school. If that's your time, it is for us in Nebraska. So, 4 steps to being more optimistic. This is coming as a part two from another post about optimism. The first part was more on the theoretical side, theory in the sense of how do you understand things in terms of the idea? How do you understand it? This is going to be more on the practical side. So it assumes that you did check out that video. I'll do a brief recap. But the idea is to be optimistic, you actually have to believe something, genuinely believe something that despite your present circumstances, there actually is something, to be hoped for. Something's more important than your negative feelings and stuff like that. And that's not easy to get. But I would say that there is a way, especially, for instance, I'm a Christian. I do believe that there is a God behind the universe. And since I genuinely believe that, no matter what my circumstances, I can always say, well, I see this, with my eyes. But just as a dog might see something and doesn't understand anything about like algebra or doesn't have any symbolic language to communicate, that doesn't mean that I can't. Okay, so if you think about how a human being has an intellectual part, we see things visually with our eyes, but we also have an intellectual capacity. And I would argue further, you have a spiritual aspect also. So if you know that there's aspects that are not obvious with just the human eye, the naked eye, but there's also things kind of behind and deep within the reality and the circumstances, then you could realize that it's not just what you see. So in Scripture it says, the righteous man walks by faith. It's not just by sense. The dog or the animal only has sense. They don't have the intellectual and spiritual. So in any case, if you genuinely believe something, there is more to what your circumstances may appear to on the surface. Then you can start cultivating some type of what I would call a transcendent vision. And it doesn't have to, it doesn't sound, this isn't like new age kind of weird type of thinking or anything like this. It's very simple. Transcendent just basically means think of a barrier and think of going past that barrier. Okay. Now, if you only have your senses, that means you can't transcend your senses. Um, so, for instance, non-intellectual animals, there's no reason to think that they could do the things that humans could do in the sense of like grasping things abstractly, reasoning about things through symbolic language, stuff like that. Um, so, anyways, so to be more optimistic, you need to have a transcendent vision, something that is more than the way that you feel, and it's even more than what you see. Just because everybody around you is unjust, that doesn't mean you have to be just. Just because you've never seen a perfect world doesn't mean you can't work towards a perfect world. Okay. All right.
Daddy, I want my blue gray car.
Okay. Let me finish this video and then we'll do it. Okay. All right. So first step. Okay. So remember how you actually know that there is something more to feelings. This is basically remembering what it is that you believe. C.S. Lewis once talked about how moral innovations isn't about what makes you moral. It's really about remembering what you believe you've already decided on at the right moments. I think that's right. So this basically harkens back to the first video. Second, make vivid your transcendent vision of reality. So assuming you have it, work on it so that it becomes more vivid. What that basically means is you spend time figuring out what you believe, not just vaguely, but in great detail with great precision. And to do that, you can actually build these ideas in things like good fiction or even good nonfiction, surrounding yourself with things that help add a little bit of clarity on every little piece. Okay. All right. So first, remember what you believe. Okay. Second, make your vision of reality more in depth, more precise. All right. Step 3. Okay. as you become more in tune and basically a more vivid storyteller, so to speak, of what your vision is, the next thing is you need to actually have concrete habits that affirm your optimism. Okay, if you aren't doing something that accords with your transcendent vision, then you really don't have a guiding vision. I emphasize the word guiding. So the thing is if so, like in Scripture, uh, faith that is not found in works, that means that your faith really isn't a living faith. Okay, if you believe something but that doesn't affect your actions, well, what kind of faith is that? If you don't rely on something and you don't see it in your actions, well, what is it? Well, it's nonsense. If you say something only in words, or if you say something that's like, "Well, I believe this," but it doesn't fit with your actions at all, you got to wonder, what does that even mean? Okay, now to combat this is basically to have concrete habits um, that actually only fit with the fact that you believe whatever you believe. So, for instance, if you plan to do something and you do something every single day, a person might be prompted to say, "Hey, why do you do that?" Um, you should be able to say, "Well, I believe X, and this is why I do Y." Um, so you should be doing something that could prompt somebody to ask something like, "Why do you do X?" Okay. Um, all right. Fourth, incorporate intrinsic tasks to your routines. This will get its own talk, but think about this. With a very clear understanding, this is my last day before Amelia goes back to school, so bear with me. So fourth, incorporate intrinsic tasks. Okay, what do I mean by intrinsic? Uh, you have a contrast between intrinsic, which basically means in and of itself, extrinsic, which means for something else. The best example of extrinsic would be money. If I gave you $1 billion and I put you on an island and you couldn't spend that money, how much effective money do you really have? Okay, none, because you have to be able to trade it. Okay, sweetie. Sweetie, you need to go into another room. Okay, so incorporate intrinsic tasks. Okay, so the money example is money is only good if you can exchange it for something else. It has no value in and of itself. If you had $1 billion but you were on an island and you couldn't exchange it, effectively it's worthless. Okay, now intrinsic tasks are not good for something else. They are good for themselves in themselves. They don't need to refer to anything else. Okay, so for instance, a work of art. You want to have a piece of art and you want to put it on your wall. In a sense, it's more intrinsic because it doesn't function for something else. It's simply there. You know that you can have it, you can gaze on it, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have the same type of function. So a tool can create something or can function to accomplish something. And when it can no longer accomplish that, you basically throw it away or repair it. Okay, so that's just to explain the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic. But here, when we talk about incorporate intrinsic tasks, what I mean is if you do certain things that just by doing them, you don't have to ask, well, what are the effects? What did I accomplish? But they are good in and of themselves. You could know that you're doing a good job without seeing whether other people approve, whether or not you accomplish some extrinsic aim, like, well, did it make me a better person, something like that. Now, an intrinsic task may actually have extrinsic benefits, but there's a few examples that I would like to point out, and this would get another talk itself. But the very short story is the fourth step of helping you become more optimistic would be something like this. Um, you should try to do your duty and not make people happy. Okay. Sometimes you're going to make people happy, and that's a good thing. But if you do your duty and that's your focus, then you did your duty, and that's it. It's kind of like end of the story. On the other hand, some people will say, "Well, I want to try something and make a bunch of money." And if you don't make money, then you can say, "Oh, I failed in this task." Or if I want to make a great work of art or write the world's greatest novel or something, and people don't accept it, then you mark yourself as a failure. But there's certain tasks that you should think about um, just by accomplishing what they are, you're not looking at the effects. You're just looking at whether or not um, they met your goal in the sense of it's the certain type of activity. So, for instance, if I spend time with my daughter and say that's the goal, that's it. Spending time with my daughter, let's say an hour, 2 hours, whatever the goal is, that would be an intrinsic task that it doesn't matter if other things happen. It's simply satisfied just by doing it. Okay. Or talk to your spouse about, I don't know, anything that's important about the day or working on your communication. Doing something that has value in and of itself, if you focus on those things, you're not always referring to other things. You're not worried about other people's approval. You're not worried about if other people will chip in and do something else. So, for instance, in Scripture, there's a passage where it mentions do things without expecting anything back. I think it was when it was discussing the Beatitudes. Do things and you don't expect anything back, okay? Because that's an intrinsic activity. It's like, it's just a good thing, okay? You might get a benefit. You might win a friend. These are benefits, but that's not the reason why you do them, okay? So, intrinsic tasks. So, to recap, um, remember how you know that there is something more to your feelings. Okay, remind yourself why you believe what you believe, and this does presuppose that you've thought about things. This might take the form of like an argument. It's like, well, I have these pieces of evidence. This explains the evidence. This is the best theory, or all of the other ideas are crazy. I don't know. I'm recapping here very briefly, but the idea is that you go through in detail why you believe what you believe. Okay. Next, you try to flesh out your vision of reality that motivates you. You need to have something that motivates you and motivates other people. And it has to be something you genuinely believe. Third, establish concrete habits that affirm your optimism. Okay, so if you have a great vision and you're working towards it, you should be doing things that prompts other people to say, hey, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? If there's no activities that would prompt a person to ask these questions, you have to ask yourself, well, do I actually believe what I believe? Faith without works is a dead faith. And this does relate to Scripture, but even if it's not, you're talking about salvation, you're also talking about your beliefs and your actions and your words linking up. They should be linking up. Okay, fourth, incorporate intrinsic tasks to routines with a very clear understanding what they are for, okay? Not for anything else, but for their own sakes. So, for instance, if you want to say, I want to be a great person today, I want to act virtuous and not vicious. I want to be kind. I want to spend so much time on this. I want to accomplish these things. And when I say accomplish, it means simply doing those activities in a specific way, possessing a specific quality. If you do those things, you are going to, instead of trying to appease and placate and impress other people, you're simply trying to, hey, I want to be virtuous. I want to act in a way that I believe is a good way to act. Will that be always good for me? Maybe not. Think about martyrs that they die for their faith. It doesn't mean you always live a prosperous, pain-suffering life. Okay, it may actually turn out the opposite. The idea is not to do something for something else. It's to do something because you genuinely think the thing that you're talking about is good, is virtuous, is saintly, is heroic. Okay, will that always give you something good? No, in terms of something physical and external. So these are 4 steps. Check out my website, commonphilosopher.com. I hope you enjoy my daughter coming in and talk with me. That's the hazard of doing Facebook Lives, even though it is pretty funny. But I'm going to go enjoy my last day with my daughter before she has to go to school tomorrow. And I hope everybody has a great week. Put in any comments if you want me to cover anything. Be sure to check out my website, commonphilosopher.com. And please, if you see anything worthwhile on social media, make sure you support the things that you think are actually making the world a better place. If that means my website, commonphilosopher.com, and Steve Byerly, the page, then please support that. You guys have a great week, and hope you have a great day.